Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast is your one-stop shop for fantasy football news and advice. Can't decide on who to draft on the first round? Going gaga on how to line up your team. Got you covered. Traditional leagues, Dynasty League, PPR League, IDP League, even Daily Fantasy Football League. Join us as we break down all the questions of fantasy football. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
And welcome to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. This episode is brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. And as always, I'm your host, Jesse Tapia. Alright, so I was kind of wondering, what are we going to do for the fantasy football show since there's no actual football game going on this weekend? It's like Super Bowl's not for a couple of weeks. No championship games, anything like that. What are we going to do? I look, turns out they do daily fantasy for the Pro Bowl. All right, for all that you guys out there that like to make some money every weekend playing fantasy football, the Pro Bowl is just the right thing for you. So we're going to have a little fun with it since it's the Pro Bowl. We're going to talk about it. Like I said, have some fun. And then it's not all we're going to do either. All right, we're not just going to make this all Pro Bowl the entire show. We're going to be talking Pat Shurmur to the Giants, talk about what it means for that offense, talk about some fantasy implications. You know, this is a football show, so we also talk football stuff. I know it's primarily fantasy during the season, but it's the off season pretty much, so now we got to do all that. Then we're going to be talking Todd Haley to the Browns, talk about what we think about that, talk about some fantasy things. And then for the fourth segment, we're going to be talking we're going to talk about Dez Bryant, maybe talk a little bit more about this past fantasy football season, anything else that comes to mind, or, like I said, just anything else that comes to mind. So, let's just get into it now. I'm going to give you guys the AFC Pro Bowl roster first, then the NFC one, and then we're going to talk about which players you should play. I do have a bit of a theory with this as far as talking about which players would be good picks. All right. Let's see. I was listening to the Pat McAfee podcast. He was talking about how, for those of you that don't remember Pat McAfee or just don't know who he is, he used to be the punter for the Indianapolis Colts. All right, so was he the punter or the kicker? I think he was the punter. Yeah, he was the punter, I think. All right, so he was talking about on his podcast how for the Pro Bowl, guys who are making a bunch of money really don't try too much because it just doesn't matter to them. But the guys who aren't making that much money try in the Pro Bowl because there's a bonus that comes with it if you win, so you want to win. So that's pretty much going to be like what I'm working off of right here as far as picking the players. Just maybe I could get it right, you know? So let's start off with the AFC Pro Bowl roster quarterbacks. You got Phil Rivers. I know his name's Philip, but I like calling him Phil for some reason. Then you got Big Ben Roethlisberger and then Derek Carr. Running back, you got Le'Veon Bell, Kareem Hunt, and then LaShawn McCoy. Wide receiver, Antonio Brown, Jarvis Landry, Keenan Allen, T.Y. Hilton. Tight end, Delaney Walker. Let's head over to the NFC. You got Russell Wilson, Drew Brees, Jared Goff. And you got Todd Gurley, Alvin Kamara, Mark Ingram. Wide receiver, you got Adam Thielen. Adam Thielen, Michael Thomas, Larry Fitz, and then Devontae Adams. Tight end, you got Jason Witten and Kyle Rudolph. All right. That's how the AFC and NFC offensive rosters look. I mean, we could go kickers. You got Graham Gano, and then you got, who's the AFC kicker? AFC kicker is Chris Boswell. That guy won a bunch of games for the Steelers this season. And then we are going to talk defenses too, I guess, NFC and AFC Pro Bowl defense. So I guess we're going to have a lot of fun with this show, obviously, because it's the Pro Bowl. So let's start off with, let's go player by player then. Who we think is going to do well, who we think isn't going to really try. Phillip Rivers, I'm not sure. I think Derek Carr out of the quarterbacks for the AFC is going to be the guy that's going to go out there and play as well as you can, I guess, for a quarterback in the Pro Bowl. Obviously, the defensive line doesn't really hit you too much. If they do, they're going to bring you down softly. All right, so there's Derek Carr, I think, who's going to do the best out of Big Ben and Phillip Rivers. Then you got at running back, you got Le'Veon Bell, Kareem Hunt, LaShawn McCoy. Like I said, if I had to pick one, it's either going to be Kareem Hunt or LaShawn McCoy, who are going to be the best out of there. Wide receiver, I'm going to go Jarvis Landry, Keenan Allen, and like T.Y. Hilton. Those are going to be the guys you got to watch out for. I mean, Keenan Allen, it depends. If Phillip Rivers plays a lot in the game, like for the first half, I'm not sure who the starter is going to be for the AFC at quarterback, but if Phillip Rivers is playing for a lot, then you're going to see him go to Keenan Allen a lot. So that might be a little play right there for your little daily fantasy team. And at tight end, I guess you got like Delaney Walker and all those guys. You got Delaney Walker, Kyle Rudolph, because again, they draft the teams and mix them up. I'm almost positive because that's what they've been doing the last few years. All right. So let's go to the NFC. As far as quarterbacks, you got Russell Wilson, Drew Brees, Jared Goff. I'm going Jared Goff as the guy who's going to play the best out of those as far as stats go. And then we got Todd Gurley, Alvin Kamara, Mark Ingram. Kamara is going to be the guy. I already know it. All right, I'm picking Kamara. And then at wide receiver, you got Adam Thielen, Michael Thomas, Larry Fitz, Devontae Adams. I don't think Larry Fitzgerald's going to be playing too much in this game. Devontae Adams might. I guess Michael Thomas would be the top guy right there. At tight end, like I said, you got Jason Witten, Kyle Rudolph. So like out of the 3 tight ends, there's Jason Witten, Kyle Rudolph, and then Delaney Walker. All right, so who do I think is gonna do the best out of those 3? I think it'd be probably Kyle Rudolph, I guess. I mean, maybe Delaney Walker, because I feel like Delaney Walker is like a guy made for the Pro Bowl. So it's Delaney Walker. So let's go and let's talk about who I think you should pick up. All right, quarterback, I named them all. I'm gonna go with Jared. Ooh, I want to go Jared Goff or Derek Carr as my quarterback. I'm gonna go Derek Carr. I think Derek Carr is the guy to take in this. Actually, you know what? I don't know. Derek Carr kind of stunk this season. Let's go Jared Goff, all right? Let's go Jared Goff as the guy who's going to put up the most stats as a quarterback. So, yeah, Jared Goff. And then as far as running backs, we're going to go 2 of them. Pick 2 of them. I'm going to go Alvin Kamara. I'm going to go with the rookies. I'm going to go with Alvin Kamara and Kareem Hunt. I think that those are going to be the guys that do the most well at the running back position. I'm laughing right now because I'm talking fantasy football about like Pro Bowl edition, so this is kind of weird. At wide receiver, let's go. I'm going to go Keenan Allen, Michael Thomas, and then I'm going to go, Keenan Allen, Michael Thomas. I'll go T.Y. Hilton since he finally gets to play with a quarterback. And then at tight end, we're going to go, let's go, Delaney Walker. Like I said, this Pro Bowl is made for him. So, we're going to go with Delaney Walker at tight end. Kickers, it's between Chris Boswell and Graham Gano. I'm going to go with Chris Boswell. Okay, so now let's talk fantasy football defenses for the Pro Bowl. At defense, you got Joey Bosa, Cameron Hayward, Yannick Ngakoue from the Jaguars. I don't know how to pronounce that last name. Then Geno Atkins, Jarrell Casey, and Malik Jackson. Linebacker for the defense in the AFC, you got Von Miller, Terrell. I forget that they draft the team, so this doesn't even matter. Man, talking Pro Bowl and fantasy football is a little bit difficult. All right, so you know what? I'm going to go with that. But as far as the Pro Bowl goes, I mean, in fantasy football, I mean, this is pretty tough. If you're doing this, I mean, I salute you right here. All right, you're really dedicated to the fantasy football game. So good luck to you. I mean, as far as like my thoughts on the Pro Bowl, like I'm not sure if I'm going to watch it or anything like that. I mean, the Pro Bowl just really hasn't been something that that has really interested me so much, just because, you know, these players really don't try or anything like that. And I get it's the Pro Bowl. You don't want to get hurt. You're just out there to have a good time, and I get that. But, I mean, just the product hasn't been that good. But like I said, as far as me picking players and all that, it's just based on, I'm not even picking guys like Antonio Brown. Because if I really had to pick, like, just, like, true, like, who, like, if everyone tried their hardest in this game, I'd go, Ben Roethlisberger, then Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown, Michael Thomas still, and then, who's the other receiver on the... And then I guess you could say I got like Devontae Adams for my 3 receivers. Then you could go tight end. I still go Delaney Walker because like the Pro Bowl is his game pretty much. This is the only time he gets to show everyone I'm still in the league and I still play well. And then defenses, like I said, I mean, they draft him, so we can't really decide on that right now. All right, so like I said, I mean, the Pro Bowl, I haven't really watched it the last few years, but I'm talking about it because, you know, it's fun. And I'm not really sure how it'll end up as far as fantasy football. Like I said, if you're playing fantasy for like daily fantasy for the Pro Bowl, I salute you completely. Like it's crazy like that people do this, you know. But you guys are the reason why I have this podcast and why I talk about it. So thanks for doing it. But there's a lot of good players in this Pro Bowl. I mean, like I said, it's the Pro Bowl. Antonio Brown, he's probably going to put up a nice show. One of the best receivers this season. Then you got guys like on the NFC, guys like Michael Thomas, Larry Fitzgerald out there, Todd Gurley, Russell Wilson, and then Le'Veon Bell, like I said. So, I mean, pretty much that's my little lineup that I'd set if I was playing daily fantasy for the Pro Bowl. I might just have to do that and see how it all ends up because you never know if you're going to win or not. But yeah, I mean, as far like I said, I mean, it's going to be next week's show is going to be a lot more in depth, okay? Because it's hard to talk about the Pro Bowl and the daily fantasy and all that because I mean, you never know who's going to show up, who's going to play well, or who's just going to be out there just for the sights and sounds. All right, like I said, like next week we're going to be talking Philly versus New England. It's going to be a fun one. We'll be doing matchups. So probably because you know how the last few weeks we've been doing each game for each segment. We'll probably space it out a little bit more and go a little bit more in depth about it, talking about receivers for one segment, probably maybe running backs for the other, and then quarterbacks for the other, you know? So we'll never know how we'll do it. Maybe there's going to be some more NFL news that we could talk about. But like I said, I mean, that's how my roster is going to go this week. All right, I'm going to repeat it once again. I'm going Jared Goff, then Kareem Hunt, Alvin Kamara, then T.Y. Hilton, Keenan Allen, Michael Thomas for my tight end, to Lady Walker, and then for my kicker to be Chris Boswell. Got to wait on the defense, obviously, until they all get picked, but nonetheless, that's how it's all going to end up. So next up, we're going to be talking Pat Shurmur becoming the head coach of the New York Giants. We're going to be talking about what that means for that offense, where players can end up, and we're going to talk about who can benefit from it as far as fantasy football goes next season. So stay tuned for that, and we'll be back.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. For that first segment, we talked about the Pro Bowl, talked about daily fantasy in the Pro Bowl, talked about who's gonna. I mean, I pretty much had a guess about it, but I mean, I used Pat McAfee, used what he said in his podcast. He talked about how players who don't make that much try and play well in the Pro Bowl so their team could win, so they could get that bonus. So I didn't talk about the players who aren't making that much, but I talked about like, you got guys like Antonio Brown and Adam Thielen and all those guys. I'm not sure how much they're going to play. So I talked about like the backup, the guys who just barely made the Pro Bowl, made those as my picks for who's going to play well. So we did that. Obviously, these guys all make a lot of money. So I tried my best. But if you do my lineup, hopefully you win. If not, it is what it is. All right, this segment, we're going to be talking more football news. Pat Shurmur becoming the head coach of the Giants. I don't even think it's official yet, but it's going to happen. All right, so what do we think of this? I really like this, okay? You saw with him in Minnesota this season. I mean, he made Case Keenum have the best year of his career, and you can go out and say that Case Keenum he has talent, he is a good quarterback already, and I don't understand that, but I mean, look at him in Houston, really didn't do too much, and then in LA he did have a chance to start, but didn't do too much there either. It really didn't look good at all. And then here he comes to Minnesota, first year, Sam Bradford goes down. Case Keenum comes in, week 1 he came in, I think it was. So yeah, he does that, and he throws for 22 touchdowns, only 7 interceptions, threw for over 3,500 yards, and led them to the NFC title game, where they did get blown out. I think he threw 2 interceptions that one, if I remember correctly. So, I mean, that was worst case scenario for him, because, I mean, Case Keenum, for that game, I mean, he was playing like a quarterback who was going to be making anywhere from 15 to 20 million. If he would have just played above average, played a good game in the NFC title game, he would have been making that much, but now I mean, he had the worst possible thing that could have happened. I mean, we had a terrible game, so now he's probably going to get from like 10 to 12 million, but that's besides the fact right now. I mean, Case Keenum will tie into all this, but like I said, I mean, Pat Shurmur, he did that, made this offense played well. I mean, Dalvin Cook came down, week 5, I think, with the ACL injury. Latavius Murray, Jerick McKinnon come in, and they played just as well, too. I mean, they weren't rushing for 100 yards or anything like that, but they were being productive. Then at the wide receiver position, you saw guys like Stephon Diggs have a good season, then Adam Thielen finally, probably the most underrated receiver in the league this season, but I think he's top 10. I mean, probably got to thank Pat Shurmur for that, too. So here he is. He's coming to New York, and I'm not sure like how this team is going to end up when week 1 comes. Obviously, all this stuff I'm going to be talking about is just predictions, but I mean, let's look at it this way, okay? There's like 3 different things that he could do. So he could be like, you know what, Eli Manning, you got 2 more years on your contract. You've done a lot for this franchise, so you're going to finish out your 2 years here. After that, you could retire or you could go somewhere else. Personally, I think after Eli Manning, I think either way, if he gets cut or doesn't get cut, he has 2 more years left in the league, and then that's it. So let's say Pat Shurmur keeps him. What do you do with number 2 with a number 2 draft pick? You're going to draft Josh Rosen, I feel. All right, it might be Sam Darnold if the Browns take Rosen, but I doubt that. I think the Browns are going to end up taking Darnold or Allen, but we're going to save Browns talk for the next segment. So I think that they're going to be taking Josh Rosen with that number 2 pick. So, I mean, you got Eli Manning playing for 2 years. Rosen can learn under him for those 2 years. And then eventually when Eli's done, you throw Rosen out there, and he's going to be playing with guys like Odell Beckham Jr. I'm not sure if Marshall's going to be there 2 years from now. And then you got guys like Evan Ingram out there too. And then I'm sure they're going to end up drafting a running back in this year also. So, I mean, they got to fix that position up also. So, I mean, Pat Shurmur, he could do that. Or he could go like this. He's like, you know what? Case Keenum did well under me. He knows my offense. If I bring him to New York, all right, he's going to have Odell Beckham Jr. He's going to have Brandon Marshall to throw to, Evan Ingram, and we can draft Saquon Barkley. I really like that idea a lot. Okay, let's say he cuts Eli and does that. I mean, you have Case Keenum playing quarterback, Saquon Barkley at running back, and then you got Marshall and Odell Beckham Jr. at receiver, and then you got Evan Ingram. That's a solid offense right there. I really like that plan. I think that's what they should do. Ooh, do I think they should do that? Actually, no, I don't think they. I don't know. Like it sounds pretty good. I mean, they'd finally get the running back that they needed. They've needed since what? Ahmad Bradshaw, I guess you could say. So yeah, I mean, when did he leave the Giants? I think 2011, 2012, sometime around there. So nonetheless, they haven't had a running back since Ahmad Bradshaw. So you're bringing a guy like Saquon Barkley, and if you bring in Keenum and draft Barkley, I mean, you're pretty much set. Keenum's not going to be able to have to do. He's not going to have to do too much. Everyone's talking about Saquon Barkley like he's the best running back prospect of all time. I've seen NFL draft writers and some scouts saying that Barkley is the best draft. Like he's a better draft prospect than Ezekiel Elliott was, or any of the other guys that have come out the last few years. So I mean, maybe they could do that. But like I said, I mean, you bring in Case Keenum, you draft Barkley, you're gonna have a solid offense right there. Okay, so let's see. They could do that, or they could just cut Eli Manning and draft Josh Rosen. I think that's the most unlikely possibility of happening right there. All right, I don't see them drafting a rookie quarterback and then just throwing him out there week 1. I don't think that's going to happen. If you have Eli Manning, why not just have him finish out his 2 years there? If you're going to draft a rookie quarterback and have the rookie quarterback learn under him. Plus, you got Pat Shurmur, who's going to be there, obviously, teaching the rookie quarterback pretty much the ins and out of playing the position. And then eventually, when Eli's done, you throw him out there. So I mean, the Giants, I think they're set up pretty nicely as far as what they need to do. I mean, there is the possibility of them just deciding, you know what, let's just draft Saquon Barkley or offensive lineman at number 2 and keep Eli Manning for these 2 years. I don't really think that's going to happen, but, I mean, that is a possibility, I guess you could say. So, I mean, I doubt it. I think that's setting him up for failure after Eli's done for the 2 years, because after that, I mean, I think, honestly, with Pat Shurmur, this team's going to be winning around 8 to 9 games with Eli Manning there for 2 years, all right? So that's going to be their record, I think. Maybe even a little bit better, because, I mean, they still got to lock up Odell Beckham Jr. to a long-term contract. And I don't think if I'm him, I'm not coming back till I get that contract. So we have to wait and see about that. But like I said, those are the 3 options I got for them right now. And as far as it all goes, I mean, as far as fantasy football goes, it's looking good for them. All right, let's say they do bring in Case Keenum. Boom. He's going to be a solid quarterback to pick up. you could put him. He's going to be throwing to Odell Beckham Jr., like I said, Brandon Marshall, Evan Ingram, and then if they bring in Keenum, I'm sure they're drafting Saquon Barkley. So even that's perfect for Keenum right there. Also, throw to Barkley out the backfield because Barkley is pretty shifty as far as catching the ball and getting into open space. So I mean, Case Keenum there. Now let's talk about Eli Manning. Same thing with him. All right, Pat Shurmur runs an offense, a quarterback-friendly offense, to where the quarterback's not going to have to do it all on his own. All right, and Eli Manning still has ability. Believe it or not, Eli Manning is a first-ballot Hall of Famer. No matter what you say, it doesn't matter. All right, Eli Manning is probably no, I'm not going to get too crazy, but I mean, he's top 10 in passing touchdowns, passing yards, is top 15 in passing in interceptions, but doesn't really matter to me. Plus, the guy's got 2 Super Bowls. So, I mean, for 2 years under Pat Shurmur, I mean, I think, because Eli Manning as a fantasy football quarterback, I mean, Eli Manning, he's had a pretty solid career playing quarterback, obviously. But as far as fantasy football goes, I don't think he's ever been a great fantasy football quarterback. I can't remember the last time Eli Manning was a guy who threw for over 4,000. I know he's done it before, but I just can't remember the last time he's actually thrown for a bunch of touchdowns in a season or just managed to keep his interceptions down. So I mean, Eli Manning's a fantasy football quarterback so far in his career has been pretty much hit or miss. But I think with Pat Shurmur out there, I think Eli Manning would be more of a hit than a miss. So, I mean, even like that, I mean, if Pat Shurmur comes and he keeps Eli and has him start, then I think Eli Manning might be a good option. And let's say they draft Josh Rosen and cut Eli and make Rosen the starter. Josh Rosen might be a little late round pickup. Because I think, honestly, right now, I think Josh Rosen is the best quarterback in the draft. I think he's better than Darnold. I think he's better than Allen. I think he's better than Mayfield. And I think he's better than Lamar Jackson. All right, I have my thoughts about Lamar Jackson. I think he is a better quarterback than people give him credit for. And I think he will be successful in the league. Because I think he's going to go late first round. If he does end up getting drafted in the first round, that's going to be to a team like Jacksonville who needs a quarterback, maybe Buffalo. Or maybe he'll get drafted by a team like the Saints and have him sit under Drew Brees for a bit. And we're going to talk about Drew Brees actually in that fourth segment. That gave me an idea right there. So, yeah, I mean, a guy like Josh Rosen, that might be a late draft pickup right there. Or maybe you keep an eye on him as the season goes on if he's the starter. And if he starts showing signs that he could be a really good quarterback in the league, then boom, you pick him up. So that's what I think about Josh Rosen. As far as the running back position goes under Pat Shurmur, I mean, Orleans Darkwa, Wayne Gallman, those really aren't guys you pick up in the draft. They're more waiver wire pickups. But if they draft Saquon Barkley, I think that's going to be an automatic pick-up right there on your fantasy football draft next season. Like I said, I mean, Pat Shurmur runs a really solid offense, quarterback-friendly offense, to where the quarterback doesn't have to do too much. All right, running back's going to get his, and if you draft a guy like Barkley, I think he's going to be successful under that offense. So, I mean, Barkley could be a guy that goes in I don't know. I'm not sure how people really value him right now. I mean, it all depends. I'm all talking hypotheticals right now. Like I said, I'm not sure how it's all going to end up, or even if Barkley even ends up in New York. Like I said, if I had to make my pick about it right now, where Barkley ends up, it's Cleveland. Because like I said, I think Cleveland's going to end up taking Darnold, and they'll end up going with Barkley with the 4th pick. But nonetheless, this is all dependent on if they bring in Case Keenum. If they bring in Case Keenum, then I think Barkley goes there. And if that happens, then I'm drafting Barkley probably 4th round. But I mean, we got to wait to see what his value is looking like as the offseason moves on and they move into the training camp and all that. So like I said, this is all hypotheticals. As far as Odell Beckham Jr. goes, I mean, I'm not really if I'm him, I'm not coming back until I get a big contract. Okay, he already had this season-ending injury. I think what was week 3, week 4, sometime around there. All right, so yeah, if I'm him, I'm gonna wait to get paid. But let's say he does get paid and he does come back. I mean, that's gonna be a nice little option right there too. I think he's gonna play really well under Pat Shurmur. Stephon Diggs already said, I think it was this past week, where Odell Beckham Jr. should be really excited playing under a guy like Shurmur because he's gonna utilize his talents even more. And Odell Beckham Jr., when he's out there and he's healthy, is one of the best receivers in the league. He's a top 5 receiver, maybe even top 3 receiver when he's out there. So I mean, him being out there is gonna be really good, and he's gonna be, like I said, if he comes back and he's ready week 1, he's a first-round pick, and some other people might devalue him, so maybe you could get him in the 2nd or 3rd round possibly, so we'll have to wait and see about that. As far as Brandon Marshall goes, I mean, I feel like he's more of that 12th round, 10th round pick as far as his draft stock in fantasy football. Okay, as far as, like I said, Pat Shurmur is probably going to make him play well, but I mean, Brandon Marshall's been kind of underwhelming the last couple of years, I feel. Last year more than the year before that, but I mean, he was hurt this year. We got to see how he comes back off of his season-ending injury. So, like I said, he's a late-round pick in your fantasy football draft for next season. And as far as Evan Ingram goes, I think that's going to be a top 5 round pickup. I think You might even be able to get him in like the first, like in the late 6th, 7th round. Because I'm not sure really where people value him right now. But if you bring in a guy like Case Keenum, or even if you have Eli Manning out there, even like a guy like Josh Rosen, I mean, Evan Ingram's going to get a lot of targets. So I think that's going to be a nice little pickup right there in the draft. And I think he's going to be playing really well. And as far as that defense goes under Pat Shurmur, they think they brought in James Betcher, the defensive coordinator from Arizona. And if I remember it correctly, as far as team defense goes in the league, Arizona had was ranked no lower than 6th in Betcher's 3 years there. So, I mean, that Giants defense is going to look good this next season, I feel, under Betcher. All right, because I know this season they did have some locker room problems, and I think that's one of the biggest reasons why the defense didn't really perform. You had guys like Janoris Jenkins and Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie, I think it was, who got suspended for one game under Bob McAdoo. And then, is it Bob McAdoo or Ben McAdoo? I think it's either or. It doesn't matter. The guy's fired. So either way, you got that went on this season. Then you got a guy like Eli Apple, who's really more of like a locker room distraction this season. You heard Landon Collins calling him a cancer. I mean, Landon Collins did take it back, but I'm pretty sure he meant it. So nonetheless, I mean, you had that. So like under James Betcher, I'm sure he's going to get this defense back on track. Pat Shurmur's a no-nonsense coach. So I mean, this Giants defense might be one you need to pick up in the draft also next year. I think they're going to be playing really well. But nonetheless, like I said, I mean, the Giants under Pat Shurmur, as far as just football talk goes, I think they're going to be a team who could compete for the wild card next season. They're going to be competing with Dallas, I feel, for one of those spots. I think Dallas, too. I mean, we're going to talk about them in the 4th segment as far as like Dez Bryant and all them. But, I mean, Dallas, even without... No, I'm going to save my Dez Bryant talk for the 4th segment. So that's all I got to say about the Giants right now. Next up, we're going to be talking about Todd Haley and the Browns and pretty much talking about what they could possibly do this offseason and how it could affect them as far as fantasy, like the players go, as far as fantasy football goes. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA, from the UFC to extreme cage fighting. They got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Sometimes I get caught up in these little intros into the other segments, and I feel like I'm doing the intro to the show again. But nonetheless, yes, this is the GSMC Fantasy Football Show. This is the 3rd segment of the show. First 2 segments, we did the Pro Bowl daily fantasy type of roster pick right there. That was a bit of fun. It was kind of difficult picking players, but it was pretty much had a little theory of it. Second segment, we talked Pat Shurmur to the Giants. All right. Talked about what it means for guys like Odell Beckham Jr., Evan Ingram, Brandon Marshall, the defense, because they brought in James Betcher as the defensive coordinator. And then we also talked about 3 quarterbacks. We talked about Josh Rosen, Eli Manning, and Case Keenum. All right, I think that, I mean, obviously it's probably going to end up being Eli Manning as the quarterback there and Josh Rosen as the backup. But, I mean, don't sleep on that whole Case Keenum idea right there. I think that's a possibility. So, let's talk Todd Haley. Let's talk Cleveland Browns. Let's talk this offseason. All right, so I was talking on the GSMC Sports Podcast. Go ahead and check that out if you haven't. But I was talking on there, and I was talking about Kirk Cousins. Talking about where he's going to end up, what I think, and a light bulb went into my head. All right, if I'm not mistaken, free agency starts March. The draft is in April. All right, Kirk Cousins is going to be looking for a new team. The Browns, they have cap space. So, if I'm the Browns, if I'm the Browns, I'm doing whatever I can to bring in Kirk Cousins and make him my starting quarterback. I'm telling him, look, we got Josh Gordon. We got Corey Coleman. Yeah, I get he's been injured all the time. He can't really stay on the field. But, I mean, he's pretty talented when he's out there. Hopefully he can stay healthy this season, all right? We got a solid offensive line for you to play behind, and our defense is looking good. and developing. It's young, but it's developing, and hopefully they take the next step this season. All right. Now we want you to be our quarterback. And as far as who your running back's going to be, yeah, we have Isaiah Crowell, but if you sign with us, we'll take Saquon Barkley with our number 1 pick. All right. And then with that number 4 pick, we'll take Minkah Fitzpatrick, and that defense will look a whole lot better than what it was last season. I mean, just imagine that. Kirk Cousins at quarterback, Saquon Barkley at running back, Josh Gordon at receiver, Corey Coleman at the on the other side of the field playing receiver. Then you got David Njoku playing tight end in his second year. And looked like he showed flashes last season of what he could be. And then if I'm the Browns, I'm going to spend a lot of the rest of the draft picking up receivers and guys on the defense too. All right, but they really need to pick up a number 3 receiver, I feel. But nonetheless, I mean, like I said, if I'm the Browns, I'm trying to get Kirk Cousins. But that's besides the point right now. All right, they hired Todd Haley as their new offensive coordinator, and I really like that move. All right, because Hugh Jackson, I really don't trust him too much as far as being the head coach and calling the plays. I mean, last season that offense wasn't looking too good with him calling the plays, and pretty much that whole team was in shambles. All right, they finished 0-16, and as far as them finishing 0-16, they've been a bad team since, 1998, so a couple of years after I was born, they've been bad since then. That's, what is it, about 19 years, I think it is, 20 years, if we're counting seasons. The 98 season you count as one, so I think that's I think 20 years they've been bad. It's like a long book of Browns misery, and I think that the final chapter is that 0-16 season. So if you're a Browns fan, I'm kind of like optimistic about this season. All right, it's not really we're going to win the division or make the wild card. It's pretty much, we're going to win 5 or 6 games. We're going to improve. I mean, you can't get any worse than 0-16 unless you just go 0-16 again. But again, that's not even getting worse. That's just staying the same. So nonetheless, I like the Todd Haley hire. I was kind of optimistic about it at first because I wasn't sure if he was going to be calling the plays. But an ESPN article told me that he's most likely going to be, he's expected to call the plays this season on the offensive side of the ball. So I liked it. I thought it was a good move. All right. What this means for the Cleveland Browns offense, it means they're going to get better. It means that they're going to be put in positions to succeed. All right. Guys like Josh Gordon are going to play better. Guys like Corey Coleman, if they can stay healthy, are going to play better. And I think David Njoku might be like a little sleeper tight end in next year's fantasy football draft whenever you have yours. All right, so I mean, I like the idea of having Todd Haley as the offensive coordinator. Not even an idea anymore. It's just he's there now. Okay, so I like the move. It's a good move right there. Now let's talk what the Browns need to do on the draft. All right, I think personally that the Browns are gonna this is my thought. I think that they're gonna end up going with Sam Darnold or Josh Allen at quarterback for the first pick, and then for the 4th pick in the draft. It's pretty much I've been reading through a bunch of mock drafts, looking at them, seeing who they think that the Browns are going to take. It's really between Minkah Fitzpatrick at safety from Alabama or Saquon Barkley, obviously the running back out of Penn State. I think Barkley is the best player in this entire draft. He was probably the best running back in all of college football last season. And if I'm the Browns, I'm going Darnold. If it was me, if I was the Browns GM, and it was up to me, I would take, and I'm not getting, what's his name, Kirk Cousins, and I'm taking Josh Rosen at number 1, and then I'm taking Saquon Barkley at number 4. Like I said, I think Josh Rosen is the best quarterback in this draft. I'm not a scout or anything like that. It's just from what I've seen. Josh Allen's more of a project right now. Sam Darnold, he's got a lot of raw talent, but he needs to develop it before I think he can become a starting quarterback week 1. I think Sam Darnold is going to need to be a quarterback who sits for a little bit of his first season. So maybe throw a guy like Deshaun Kaiser out there to start week 1, and then if he's not working out, then you throw Darnold out there. But I think Darnold needs to develop his raw talent a little bit more. All right, so let's say that they do go Darnold with the number 1 pick, and then they go Barkley with the number 2 pick. Look at that offense already. Okay, you either got Kaiser or Darnold at quarterback. I think. If it was me, I'm starting Kaiser week 1, and then I'm going to have Darnold sit for a few weeks until Kaiser throws a lot of interceptions again in the red zone like how he did this season. All right, so I'm guessing it'd be either Darnold or Kaiser at quarterback week 1, then Barkley at running back, and then you have Gordon, Coleman, and Njoku, and maybe hopefully they draft a 3rd receiver. They really need one, I feel, because that receiving corps without Gordon and Coleman for most of last season was just brutal. Kaiser had no help, if we're being real here. All right, so man, I think my voice cracked right there. That's pretty embarrassing, but nonetheless, I mean, you got to take the punches right here. But nonetheless, like I said, I mean, that's a pretty nice offense right there. All right, I mean, as far as fantasy football goes, Darnold, I don't think is a guy you want to draft. I think he's more of like a wait-and-see type of guy, and I don't even think he's going to be putting up big numbers in his first year. I mean, he could under Todd Haley, because Todd Haley could help try and develop him, because Todd Haley was the wide receivers coach with the Dallas Cowboys from 2004 to 2006, and that's when Tony Romo came into the league, and I saw that like Todd Haley did have a hand in helping develop Tony Romo. So I mean, Todd Haley, everywhere he's gone is pretty much, he's been like, other than being a head coach, he's had good success wherever he's gone as an whether it be offensive coordinator, because remember, he was the offensive coordinator for that Arizona Cardinals team that went to the Super Bowl. I know Ken Wisenhunt called plays for most of the season, but towards the end of the season is when Todd Haley started to call plays. I mean, when you have a guy like Edgerrin James as your starting running back, and you still have one of the better offenses in the league, I mean, that's pretty solid right there. And I'm not trying to take anything away from Edgerrin James. He was a great running back with the Colts, but I mean, he was pretty much past his prime with the Cardinals. So I mean, yeah, and look at him with the Pittsburgh Steelers from 2012 to 2017. The Steelers consistently had a top 10 offense in the league. All right. Yeah, I know he didn't get along with Big Ben too much for most of those years, but nonetheless, I mean, they put up results and they played well. So everywhere Todd Haley has gone, I mean, he's had success. So, I mean, that's really good for the Browns right here. Like I said, if they draft Sam Darnold or even Josh Rosen, I'm staying away from them as far as fantasy football goes. But if they draft Saquon Barkley, I think that's a big pickup right there. All right, you draft Barkley, like I said in the last segment, for the Giants. All right, I think Barkley has a better chance of ending up on the Browns than he does the Giants, but if the Browns get him, then, I mean, he's the 4th, 5th round value pick right there. Again, this is just off the top of my head before anything, like before training camp and all that goes, but like Barkley, I think he'd be really successful with that Browns offense. And Josh Gordon has a training camp under his belt right here, goes through a full off season. I think he's going to play really well this season. I think he's going to break out. It's looking like he's finally got his head on straight. And Corey Coleman, when he's out there and he's not hurt, I mean, he's a solid little number 2 or number 3 receiver on your fantasy team, or even like a bench option if someone has a bye. It's just the biggest problem with Corey Coleman is that he can't stay healthy. All right, so we got to wait and see about that. But let's see if let's talk if they ended up going with Kirk Cousins. I mean, Kirk Cousins on the Browns would be like, you got to take him in your fantasy football draft if Kirk Cousins ends up on the Browns. There's a lot of players. If Kirk Cousins ends up on the Browns, then pretty much every player on that offense is going to be solid, I feel. All right, because like you draft Kirk Cousins, and I know Kirk Cousins, like me personally, I've always thought that he was a good quarterback, but not a great one. I know he's going to be one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the league this season once he gets his contract, whether it be from a team like whether the Redskins want to offer it to him or the Broncos. And like I said, I don't really expect Kirk Cousins to end up in Cleveland. I think that is the move that they should make, but I don't really expect it to happen. I think he's going to end up in Denver. And that's a story for a different day. Maybe we could talk about his fantasy value with a team like Denver and talk about them in the 4th segment also. All right, but like I said, like if Kirk Cousins ends up with the Browns, I think he gets better as a quarterback. That's a quarterback you could take in your draft, probably 5th, 6th round type value right there. And then even like a guy like Saquon Barkley, all right, you got a solid quarterback at Kirk Cousins. It's only going to help Saquon Barkley at the running back position. That probably elevates his value a little bit in the draft. Then Josh Gordon, he can only get better if he has Kirk Cousins as his quarterback. I mean, Josh Gordon as it is already a freak of nature at the wide receiver position, so I think he's already going to play well with a guy like Sam Darnold or even Deshaun Kaiser out there, even like a guy like Josh Allen, honestly. Josh Gordon is a guy who makes his quarterback play better, but if you already have a good quarterback set at the position in Kirk Cousins, I mean, Josh Gordon's numbers are going to be out of this world, I feel. All right, so I mean, Josh Gordon gets better. I mean, Josh Gordon next season in the draft, in your fantasy football draft, like I'm going to be taking him high. I think people are going to really stay away from him because they really don't trust him too much yet. But, I mean, I had him on my team this season, and for those last 3 weeks, I think I started him 2 weeks, and he put up around 10 points a game for me. So, I mean, I'm going to be really high on Josh Gordon in the draft next year, but, I mean, we just got to wait and see how it ends up. And like I said, Corey Coleman and Kirk Cousins, I mean, Corey Coleman's just got to stay healthy, but if he does, he's a solid little option as a number 3 on your team or even a bench option right there. And I haven't really talked too much about David Njoku, but I know he was owned in most of the leagues this season, and I think people were really waiting for him to have his breakout game, and he did have a couple of games where he did step up and play really well, but I think this season is going to be the one where he puts up a little bit more stats, scores a little bit more touchdowns, and develops into a better tight end this season. So, I mean, as far as that goes, Kirk Cousins is the best option for that team as far as them winning ball games. Like if they get Kirk Cousins and they draft Barkley with the Barkley number 1 and then Fitzpatrick number 2 with the 4th pick, that's a team, that might be able to compete for that number 2 spot in the division. Maybe. I don't know. Like, you get Kirk Cousins, that's already an established quarterback in the league, and he's a good quarterback. So that's really interesting to see. And as far as the defense goes for the Browns in fantasy football, I mean, I don't really think they're a team that you should draft, a defense you should draft. I think it's more of a wait and see type of thing, and if during beginning of the season and towards the middle they're playing well, then you pick them up. But other than that, I really don't trust the Cleveland Browns defense too much right now, just because they're still really young. They got to develop some more before I start thinking about picking them up. So that's all I got to say. That's all I got to say about the Browns right now. Next up, we're going to be talking Dez Bryant. Maybe we'll talk Drew Brees a bit. We'll talk Kirk Cousins in Denver possibly. So we'll do all that. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
And welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. To recap the show so far, we talked about the Pro Bowl in the first segment, talked about the Giants and Pat Shurmur in the second, and talked about the Cleveland Browns in the third. All right, as far as the Cleveland Browns go, I really need them to sign Kirk Cousins to a big deal. They do that, that's going to be a team who could compete for the, I don't know, I don't want to get ahead of myself. That's a team who could win some ball games, I think. But plus, like, it's not just getting Kirk Cousins, though. It's drafting Saquon Barkley and Minka Fitzpatrick in the draft also with those first two picks. So we're going to have to wait and see how it all ends up, but that's what I think they should do. But for this one, we're going to be talking, let's continue talking Kirk Cousins. We're going to talk about him and as far as where he's going to end up and the best possible options for him. All right, we'll talk about Dez Bryant and the Cowboys a bit, and then we'll talk about Drew Brees a little bit too. See what he still has left to offer the next couple of seasons, and whether or not he's going to end up in New Orleans. So let's talk Kirk Cousins. All right, let's say he ends up in Denver. Let's say John Elway's like, you know what, I'm tired of drafting bad quarterbacks. Let me get someone who I know is already a good quarterback in the league, and he picks up Kirk Cousins and signs him. All right, what does that do for the Broncos offense? That makes Demaryius Thomas a viable first option in fantasy football again. All right, remember when he had Peyton Manning out there and Demaryius Thomas was tearing everything up. This season, he was more of like a number 3 receiver on your team, number 2 possibly. All right, depending on how good or bad your team was. Okay, and I think with Kirk Cousins out there, just like I said last segment, I mean, if Josh Gordon gets Kirk Cousins as his quarterback, Josh Gordon's number is going to go all the way up. All right. And if Demaryius Thomas gets Kirk Cousins, then Demaryius Thomas is going to see an increase in his numbers too. I mean, the guy's been putting up solid numbers with guys like Trevor Siemian, Brock Osweiler, and Braxton Lynch. All right, those guys right there. I mean, you guys know how I feel about Brock Osweiler. I mean, I really do not like the guy as a quarterback at all. I think he's one of the worst quarterbacks in the league, if not the worst. And then as far as Braxton Lynch goes, he just doesn't have it. And Trevor Siemian, I think, is going to be a solid little backup in the league going forward, but that's it. So Kirk Cousins goes to the Broncos. I mean, that's a team who could possibly compete for their division. The AFC West might be a little weak next season, all right? I think the Chargers are going to be a good team. I think right now, my way too early pick for the division next season would be the Chargers winning the division. All right? You still got Phillip Rivers, Melvin Gordon, Keenan Allen, who stayed healthy. You got to wait and see what Mike Williams, how he develops, what he becomes in his second season. You got Tyrell Williams. You got a solid you got a top 10 tight end, Hunter Henry, who might even become a top 5 tight end next season if he develops right. And then you got a defense who played extremely well. So, I mean, right now, my way too early divisional pick for the AFC West division winner would be the LA Chargers. As far as the Chiefs go, I mean, I think they're going to end up trading Alex Smith, so Patrick Mahomes would be the guy there, and I'm not sure what kind of quarterback he is yet. He played good in the Week 17 game this season, but, I mean, that's just one game right there. And as far as the Raiders go, I mean, you got to figure out, like, Amari Cooper needs to figure out how to catch the ball. Michael Crabtree, I'm not even sure if he's going to be back next season, but he was a solid little option in fantasy football this season. I mean, he really, how do you say, He was playing well for most of the season, and then he pretty much turned it down towards the end of the season. Marshawn Lynch was a disappointment. So, the Raiders, I'm not too sure about them. They got a terrible defense. But like I said, going back to the Broncos, if they get Kirk Cousins, as far as fantasy football goes, Kirk Cousins is going to play well. All right. Demaryius Thomas is going to benefit from it. They got to bring back Emmanuel Sanders, I think. And, the defense is going to benefit from a guy like Kirk Cousins being there because, you know what? I know the defense is getting older, and last season they didn't do too well, but, how well can you play when you're on the field constantly and you give up a touchdown? You already know the game's pretty much over because you can't put up more than 10 points a game. All right. So I think that had more to do with it than Denver just not being that good on the defensive side of the ball. So I think like a guy like Kirk Cousins going there, pretty much elevates everything else around him. All right, but Denver's not the only option. Like I said last time, I talked about Cleveland. There is also the possibility of him possibly making it to Jacksonville. I'm not sure Jacksonville does it because I'm not sure they're going to want to pay him on that money. Eventually, you're going to have to pay guys like Jalen Ramsey and the rest of those young guys on that team. Guys like Leonard Fournette are going to be up for contracts in a few years. So you're going to have to worry about that. Plus, you might have to pay Allen Robinson this season. So I'm not sure what they're going to do there. Like I said, it's unrealistic for Kirk Cousins to end up in Jacksonville, I feel. But if he does, D.D. Westbrook play instantly goes up. Marquise Lee goes up. Allen Robinson goes up. All right, even a guy like Keenan Cole. Jacksonville, if they get Kirk Cousins, is a Super Bowl contender and would be my way too early Super Bowl pick. All right, all they needed this season was a quarterback who pretty much played above average. They didn't get that from Blake Bortles. Yeah, Blake Bortles had a pretty decent playoff run, but it was still, it was just average, all right, what he did. So, it's really nothing to write home about. If they bring in Kirk Cousins, all right, Leonard Fournette, he's going to play even better. Because teams aren't going to be able to stack the box as much as they did against them this season. All right, so yeah, it's going to be more spaced out for him. He's going to have more holes to hit. All right, and teams are going to be on their toes as far as are they throwing the ball or are they going to be running it? Because this season Jacksonville's offense was more of a run offense because Blake Bortles was their quarterback. So you throw Kirk Cousins out there, pretty much makes everyone on the offense already way better than what they were this season. And as far as the defense goes, it doesn't really affect them. The defense was already the number one in the league. So, Kirk Cousins going wherever he ends up, I feel that's just going to elevate every player around him as far as fantasy football impact goes. All right. So that's how I feel about Kirk Cousins. Now let's talk a little bit about Dez Bryant and the Dallas Cowboys. So Stephen Jones, the VP for the Dallas Cowboys, goes on one of their team podcasts and talks about Dez Bryant and his contract, talks about how they had high expectations for him, because I think he signed, like a 6-year, $75 million deal, something like that, around there. So they did that, and Stephen Jones is basically talking about how his expectations for him were high. He really hasn't met those expectations, really hasn't been the same player he was since Tony Romo retired, and he's been a bit of a distraction on the field with his little sideline outbursts. All right, then at the Senior Bowl, Jerry Jones gets asked by a reporter if Dez Bryant's going to be back next season, and then Jerry Jones does he's under contract, like whoever's under contract should be back next season. He didn't say, yeah, Dez Bryant's our number one receiver and he's going to be back. He didn't say that at all. Not really a vote of confidence there. And as we all know, Dez Bryant has really slipped in his play the last couple of seasons with Dak Prescott as his quarterback. All right, he was with Tony Romo out there. He was putting up near 90 catch seasons, over 1,200 yards at least, and putting up crazy touchdown numbers, all right? Double-digit touchdown numbers with ease. Obviously, with Dak Prescott, that's not the case, because with Dak Prescott, they can't run that little deep ball, big play offense right there, because Dak Prescott isn't that type of quarterback. Dak Prescott is a game manager, if you haven't noticed, all right? I know that most quarterbacks in their second year really digress, and in the third year is where they really pick it up again, but I just don't think Dak Prescott is a quarterback who's going to be thrown deep or anything like that. He likes throwing it to the slot. He likes throwing it to guys like Jason Witten also, because they run their underneath routes a whole lot, and it's an easier throw for him to make. So, as far as Dez Bryant goes, I'm not sure if he's going to be back next season. Like, if he were to leave the Cowboys, as far as like a team standpoint, I don't think the Cowboys get any worse with Dez Bryant not being there. I think if Dez Bryant leaves or they get rid of him, then you re-sign Bryce Butler and have him take Dez Bryant's spot. Bryce Butler, I feel fits that offense a whole lot better than Dez does, but I do think that Dez Bryant is a better receiver by far than Bryce Butler. It's just pretty much how you fit into the scheme. All right, so let's say that they keep Dez Bryant. Obviously, if they keep Dez Bryant, his fantasy value is still pretty low. You're not going to be taking him in the first few rounds how you used to. You're going to be waiting until like the 7th, 8th round to pick up a guy like Dez Bryant, but I feel that people are still going to pick him up pretty early just because his name is Dez Bryant. They think about what he's done before. Dez Bryant isn't the receiver that he used to be, or at least he could be, but just not with Dak Prescott as his quarterback. So, it's either he fits into the offense and he figures out how to run those routes and he figures out how to like pretty much just be a short route receiver and go from there, or he's going to leave and go to a different team. I'm not sure how many fits there are for Dez Bryant out there. Maybe a team like Miami or San Francisco would be a fit for Dez Bryant. I mean, if Dez Bryant becomes available, then you see a guy like Jarvis Landry not get re-signed by Miami. But, I mean, Dez Bryant, as far as him getting cut, that wouldn't be till June, I feel. So, I mean, you can't really hold your breath on that. So, I mean, Dez Bryant, the only like true spot for him out there is San Francisco. I mean, imagine him with Jimmy Garoppolo. That'd be perfect for Dez Bryant right there. So if he were to leave the Cowboys, I think his value goes up as far as in fantasy football. But if he stays with the Cowboys, he's still going to be a late round pick or a late draft pick in your fantasy football draft. So I'm not really too sure what I think about Dez Bryant right now. But, I mean, he's really digressed since Dak Prescott became the quarterback. We're going to have to wait and see what the Cowboys want to do with him. But, I mean, I think they're going to end up keeping him. But it wouldn't be shocking if they let him go either. So we're going to have to wait and see. Now let's talk Drew Brees. Where's he going to end up? Are we sure that he's going to end up back in New Orleans? I mean, because if I'm Drew Brees, I'm still wanting about $20 million a year. Drew Brees is still a top 10 quarterback in this league. I wouldn't consider him top 5 anymore. I mean, I guess you have to go with Tom Brady at number 1. Then, I mean, maybe Drew Brees still is a top 5 quarterback. I mean, let's throw out top. I'm going to throw out 5 quarterbacks at the top of my head that I think are top in the league right now. No order. Brady, Stafford, Wilson, Rodgers, Roethlisberger. Let's see. Brady, Roethlisberger, Wilson, Stafford, Rodgers. That's 5 right there. I don't think he's, as of right now, his ability, I don't think Drew Brees is better than any of those 5 quarterbacks as far as ability right now. I'm not talking all time or anything like that. All right, so let's see. Where does Drew Brees going to end up? You think New Orleans is going to want to pay him $20 million a year? I think they probably they will end up doing it. But, I mean, there's always the possibility of a guy like them drafting a guy like Mason Rudolph late in the draft and making him the starting quarterback. I think they should, even if they do sign Drew Brees. It's going to be no more than 2 years, I think Drew Brees is getting with his new contract. So if you do that, then I think the Saints should draft a guy like Mason Rudolph to learn under Brees for a couple of years. And then once Brees' contract is up, boom, Mason Rudolph becomes a starter. But that's a different discussion for a different day. All right, so let's say, I mean, if Drew Brees ends up with the Saints still, I mean, his fantasy impact, I mean, he's still a top quarterback, I think, as far as fantasy football goes. He did have a bit of a down year this past season, but I think he's going to pick it up this next season. All right, he's not going to be a first-round pick or a second-round pick or a third-round pick, but he's going to be more of like a 4th, 5th, 6th-round pick right there if you need a quarterback. All right, that's with the Saints. Let's say he goes to, like, what are the options for him if he doesn't go to the Saints? Maybe a team like Minnesota. That's been a team that's been thrown around there if Drew Brees doesn't end up back in New Orleans. I think even then, if he ends up with Minnesota, his value stays around 4th, 5th, 6th round. Maybe even goes down a little bit because you know what, that offense that he's got in New Orleans right now is miles better than the offense in Minnesota. All right, I'll take Michael Thomas over Stephon Diggs. I'll take Kamara and Ingram over even Dalvin Cook or whatever running back you want to throw out there. The only really better option that Minnesota has on their offense is Thielen compared to Ginn and Rudolph compared to Josh Hill. That's where I think if Brees was to end up with the Vikings, then Kyle Rudolph might be a top 3 round pick right there in fantasy football draft. Brees likes throwing to his tight ends a lot. He did so with Jimmy Graham. He throws to Josh Hill quite a bit. Not really good enough for fantasy numbers, but he does look for him. And then, like I said, with Kyle Rudolph with his ability, as we know already, he'd thrive under a quarterback like Brees. So, I mean, Minnesota is a team like he could end up with, and I think another team too is the Jacksonville Jaguars, team that needs a quarterback. A nice little 2 years for Jacksonville. Like Jacksonville, like they're so close to winning a Super Bowl. If you put a guy like Manning, Cousins, or Brees on that team, I think they get a Super Bowl within the next 2 years. All right, you throw a guy like Brees out there, I mean, that's my Super Bowl pick also right there. If you throw Brees out there, all right? Brees is still, like I said, still a top quarterback in the league. Not top 5, but still a guy you can look for and one of the better quarterbacks in the league. If he goes to a team like Jacksonville, then I think his fantasy value might go up a little bit. Maybe a 3rd round pick right there in your draft. Okay, because D.D. Westbrook is a quick little guy out there. Then you got Keenan Cole, who's really solid receiver, who could develop, not solid receiver, yeah, but he could develop into one. He showed flashes of what he could be. Then you got guys like guys like Marquise Lee, Allen Hurns, and Allen Robinson. I mean, that's a lot of receivers to keep out there. That's the Allen Robinson, Lee, Hurns, Westbrook, Cole. So that's 5 receivers. That's pretty good right there, I feel, that they could keep on the team. All right, so those guys would benefit greatly from a guy like Brees playing there. Brees would benefit from those guys out there. And like I said, Leonard Fournette, just like he would Kirk Cousins, would be even better than he was this past season. All right, because obviously they're not going to stack the box anymore because Blake Bortles isn't that quarterback. So we're just going to have to wait and see how it all ends up. But if I'm Drew Brees, I mean, his value is starting to fall down a little bit. But if he ends up with a team like, if he stays with the Saints, I mean, he's still a 4th, 5th round pick right there. And then if he goes to Jacksonville, I think his values goes up a little bit more. So we're going to have to wait and see how it all ends up. But that's actually going to wrap it up for today's show. First up, we talked about the Pro Bowl. Second, we talked about Pat Shurmur heading to the Giants, what that means for that offense. Also, what James Betcher becoming the defensive coordinator means for the defense. We talked about Todd Haley and the Cleveland Browns, what they need to do in the offseason as far as pretty much building that offense. And then we talked about Kirk Cousins to the Broncos, to the Jags. We talked about Dez Bryant, his value. And we just finished talking about Drew Brees. So that's going to wrap it up for today's show. Thanks for listening to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Jesse Tapia. We're here every Thursday. So stay tuned till then, and we'll talk to you later.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.